I am so excited for today's conversation. And I have to tell you, it's a conversation that has been in the back of my mind, not for days or for weeks, but for months and possibly even over a year's time. I think the primary question is, how does God truly feel about intuition? Is it a sin? Is it a gift? That's what we're here to talk about. So right out of the gate, I want to talk about how God and Jesus expanded my intuition as a whole. And if this is the only thing you stick around to hear, my intuition and psychic perception only is what it is because of my faith in God and the relationship I have built with Jesus over the years. And if you don't have faith in God or a relationship with Jesus, I hear you. I hear you so loud and clear because I was right there with you only a few years ago. Hang in there with me. I promise it's going to be worth your time. The next thing I would love to talk about is the fear in so many religious platforms when it comes to the seer, when it comes to someone who embraces their intuitive ability, why this is, and why it's up to us as individuals to really carve out our own path. And then finally, I want to dive into the effects our past lives have when it comes to our awareness, when it comes to our ability to intuit in our everyday life, and where we might be open and where we might be blocked. You know me, I'm all about intuition. I'm all about expanding our awareness. I'm all about the healing journey, getting clear, and using this life to just break through challenge after challenge after challenge to feel all of the things and get as close to God, as close to our higher self in every single way possible. Over the last several years in particular, there has been a psychic boom. The people are waking up. Intuition at its root, the very core of it, is love. That's all intuition is. It is the awareness that there is this gorgeous, great source that guides you and supports you and penetrates your thoughts and your sensations and your inner sight and your inner hearing to ensure that your highest good is being supported at all times. So if we're to look at the root of intuition being love, what is the greatest source of love? It's God. God is love. What I've found over the years is the closer I've grown to God, the more curious I've become about knowing God and understanding the universe and how God communicates through this physical form, the more my heart space has opened. And in that, it's also connected my mind and every other sensation I experience in my physical form. So if the question is, does God support intuition? The answer is yes. It took me at least a good couple years, I'd say 2 or 3 years, before I even became comfortable with claiming God as God. Before that, it was always referring to God as the universe or source energy or life force energy, anything else other than God. And talk about God knocking on the door. We had a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses show up one day, and I was very open to hear what they had to talk about. And I forget what our first meeting was, but the second meeting, when they came back, it must have been a week later, I was referring to God as Lord. And the one gentleman looked at me and he said, Lord doesn't really describe God as God. If you think about kings and queens across sea, they're referred to as Lord. And then something inside of me clicked, and I realized that I had been using the terms Lord or the universe or source energy all in substitute for that one word, that one title, that one phrase I already knew deep down that I wanted to start projecting. For whatever reason, I didn't feel confident enough to do so. And so after that conversation, I started to say God every time I wanted to describe or point out this great source of of energy in charge of all of the things. Now that I've established more of a relationship with God, I was very drawn into wanting to read the Bible. And that's when I came across a couple of verses that just solidified everything I had already felt in my gut, which was God is our intuition, and we cannot get that confused with anything else. Actually, sharing this realization is bringing me back to a memory I had where I was sitting in a park with a couple of friends, and it was right around the new moon. This is a perfect time for getting clear on what it is we would like to manifest, what it is we desire, and what it is we want to call into our life. When it came time for me to share, I said, I want stronger intuition. And at that point, my intuition was already fairly strong. I was able to perceive messages coming through me often, but for some reason, this was my wish. I wanted it to get stronger and stronger. And a couple of months later, after making that new moon wish, was also after I started to read the Bible and I understood that intuition is God. And what had dawned on me, what had dropped into my awareness on this walk was it's not that I wanted stronger intuition. What I was in search of was a stronger relationship with God. And so here's something I'll say really quick when it comes to the things we do want to manifest and when it comes to our deepest desires. Notice what they are. These ideas are seeds of inspiration that drop into our awareness, and even if we're unsure with where they're going to take us or what path we're going to be led down, go with it. I'm telling you, something inside of me flipped, and that's when I truly got it. Anytime I wanted my intuition to become stronger, my awareness to pick up on more intuitive messages, it was all because I wanted a closer relationship with God. It was all because I wanted to be closer to Him. And in order to do that, I needed to get clear on making myself a schedule and being as consistent as possible with my meditation practice, certainly with my prayer practice, as well as doing my healing work. You know, the healing work, if we're so brave, doesn't ever really come to an end. It doesn't need to be a scary thing. It can be actually quite a beautiful thing because healing is the most gracious transformation any one of us can sign up for. And it's because the gifts that God fills our life with through doing the healing work, it makes the journey all the more wild. So now, if you'll go ahead and humor me, I would love to talk about what I found in Genesis that made all of the sense to me. And I was like, okay, this is fantastic. This is great. This is the only thing I need to know about intuition and where psychic perception stands with God. It was the only thing I needed to know. If you've read Genesis or not, I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with the story. And if Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat comes to mind, then this is where this is going. It's a pretty big story, but let's just go long story short here. Joseph was one of 12 brothers, but he was also quite the favorite, and the brothers didn't really like this much. Joseph, in my mind, is like the OG of dream interpreting. And one morning he woke up and he had a dream, and he told his family about this dream, and they weren't very happy about what it was he had dreamt. And see, when it comes to our dreams, this is God's chance and God's way to stream information through us, if that's predictions or letting us know how to navigate our life more clearly while we sleep. Because while we sleep, the logical mind is off, our eyes are shut, and God is able to use our clairvoyant sense to deliver any message that He needs to give us. And if our clairvoyance is open in the morning, we'll often remember or whatever it was we dreamt. Back to Joseph. Joseph was able to not only understand what his dreams meant, but he was able to hear other dreams of other people and tell them exactly what it was God was communicating to them while they slept as well. Joseph wasn't really favored by his brothers, and one day he found himself to be in a particular situation where his brothers took it upon themselves to sell him off to Pharaoh, to another land. And they went back to the father and explained that Joseph had a terrible accident and ended up passing away. Their father was just heartbroken. And Joseph was brought to serve in Pharaoh's home. Well, one day, Pharaoh was gone, and Pharaoh's wife approached Joseph and invited him into her room, looking to snuggle. And Joseph respectively declined. Pharaoh's wife felt maybe a little bit embarrassed or ashamed that he didn't take her up on her offer, and she ends up accusing him, which then lands him in jail. So not only was he unjustly sold, but he now finds himself in jail for doing the right thing. All along, Joseph's primary message was, I'm okay because God is with me. While he was in jail, two other gentlemen ended up having a dream, spoke the dream out loud, and Joseph was able to let them know what God's message was. And he said to these two men, if you get out of here, and if this does come to fruition, could you please speak of my name highly in order to get me out as well? The two men end up getting out of jail, but completely forget to mention Joseph to Pharaoh, and Joseph remains in jail. Well, one of these men end up getting murdered, where the second man is still alive. Doesn't Pharaoh end up having a dream, which includes seeing 7 very, very healthy, full, plump cows, and then 7 very sickly cows to follow? Pharaoh ends up finding out that Joseph is able to interpret dreams. And this is what brings me to the section of Genesis. This is 41, verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. And I have heard it is said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. And Joseph was able to interpret what God is telling you is your land and your harvest are going to be so abundant for the next 7 years. But for the 7 years to follow, there's going to be a famine. There's going to be a shortage. So what God is suggesting is save and put away a part of your harvest for the next 7 years so that you have enough food to feed the people of your land when the land is in drought. And all through Joseph's challenges and turmoil, there was a common theme that was repeated for him. And it went along the lines of, but the Lord was with Joseph and always gave him favor. Joseph's complete surrender in God is what makes his story so remarkable and what makes understanding our own experience so much more clear. The more we're able to surrender to God, the more we're able to put down our defenses and say, okay, you're in charge. Like, I get it. I see you. I hear you. Lead me. Where is it you want me to go? It was in Joseph's surrender and never taking credit for any interpretation, for any amount of knowing or any message of intuition coming through him that really helped me also surrender to God and also say, I know that if you want me to receive something to pass forward, I will. And I'm not the one interpreting. I'm not the one intuiting. It is God expanded in my heart that is allowing me to perceive my awareness as a whole. Now, before we start talking about all of the fear that stems from religious organizations, let's get clear on one thing. If anyone is a part of an organized religion or not, everything will always come down to a person's individual relationship that they have with God. And if there is enough consistency and enough willingness to get quiet and to reflect with God every day and to be able to feel God's power within them, within the body that God created himself, then there is going to be a vast difference between person A who does those things and then person B who doesn't do those things. Because let's face it, being a part of a religious organization doesn't make a person any better, and rightfully so, any worse off than the next. As we know, when it comes to fear, fear only exists in the things that we don't understand. If we don't understand something, or if we don't have a relationship with it, of course we're going to fear it, which I think is not funny because God is the foundation to all religion. But outside of the texts is where we can actually develop a personal relationship with God. On top of that, there are 1,000,001 different layers in the Bible that persecute against seers, against psychics and mediums, anyone or anything of that nature. And I think that if people understood where intuition came from or what intuition actually is, which is God's love expanding in the heart space, it would be easier to understand why or how so many people are able to intuit or perceive information that God sends directly to us, and not even through our bodies, but in our everyday life and all around us. Our eyes getting drawn up to the sky and noticing birds, and then even to go a little bit deeper to count the number of birds that are flying by and to attune to the knowledge and wisdom of numerology to see what it is God is explaining to us. I think the last point I would have to make when it comes to organized religion, and maybe religion itself putting the fear of God into people, because we can't ignore that either. There are very intense messages out there about God, and that's because people in general find themselves to be more comfortable following in the words and following in the footsteps of others, as opposed to carving out their own path, their own intimate experience with something. So if you've ever been in a position where you have felt judged, or you have felt as though it was unsafe for you to express or for you to experience your intuitive senses and to receive messages and support and guidance from God, I hope that these following words rest so soundly in your heart. It is safe. It is safe for you to experience the wholeness of God, and you don't have anything to be nervous about or scared about moving forward. I think this is a perfect segue into past lives and what the energy we pull into our current life from past lives has to do with our ability to perceive intuition, and then also what happens in terms of our intuition being blocked because of past experiences. If you have awareness around your intuition being there, but there's this knowing inside of you that something is blocked, or information or messages aren't coming in as clearly as they could, if at all. This could go for someone who is blocked in the third eye space and doesn't seem to see visions or remember their dreams or see mental images within their third eye. Or this could be for someone who doesn't really pick up on physical sensations in their body. So important to go in and get curious and dig around and look around. I have a few suggestions for you that I'm going to leave until the end of the conversation, just so that I could stay with a clear mind here. Let's just actually take a moment here to imagine ourselves in a past life, especially if you're someone who feels strongly intuitive, who is already connected to their intuition, or knows that they can expand their awareness more, but feels blocked. Likely, you were probably someone who was very in tune with your intuition in these previous lives, but because others were in fear of what they didn't understand, you were likely persecuted for it, maybe burned at the stake, maybe left to die in a forest, maybe pushed overboard into an ocean with a rock tied at the bottom of your feet. I mean, there are so many different ways people would justify death for others that they didn't understand, like 10 lifetimes, 100 lifetimes, 1,000 lifetimes ago. So imagine yourself in these moments where you are aware of your intuitive connection, and then you are sought out and then murdered for it. At the time your soul leaves that experience, what it's holding on to is the absolute agony of being misunderstood. And so what happens in the next reincarnation is it's whoosh, things get shut down because, like heck, you're going to let anyone know about your intuitive abilities. We're born and then reborn and reborn, even sometimes in the same physical body. I've experienced many transformational deaths in just this lifetime alone, but lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, our mission is to work through the things that keep us stuck, to work through our challenges and our own fears and our own worry when it comes to our journey and it comes to our life's path. So now getting to the work of figuring out exactly what happened in past lives for you. This is where the healing aspect of our journey comes in. And personally, I love past life work. A couple of things you can do is right off the start, pray with God and ask that you are absolutely surrounded in the most loving light. Be sure that you set the intention and set yourself up to be fully protected and fully supported and taken care of while you do any type of energy work. This part is so important and really should never be overlooked. If you're doing energy work with yourself, so if that's balancing out your chakras, if it's working with a Reiki practitioner, in meditation, anything where you are exposing and expanding and building on your energetic awareness, make sure to pray and just surround yourself with that love and with that light. Otherwise, we leave ourselves open to any energy nearby, and our energy is sacred. So we want to put the steps in place to ensure that we are kept safe. Going into your past lives or seeing bits and pieces of your story to let you kind of figure out what's happening in your current situation isn't very complicated at all. This can easily be achieved in meditation or searching around in your Akashic Records, which is a library full of every single bit of information having to do with every single life that you have ever lived. Past life exploration can be especially helpful when we notice the same reoccurring challenges coming up over and over and over again. We can figure out where the original seed or the original belief was planted, and then we can go ahead and pull that out and rewrite our story. I, for one, absolutely love working with past life work. I love seeing all of the blocks and all of the distortions within the energy being removed removed and repaired, allowing for intuition to expand even more. Don't forget, the more healing work we do, the more our heart space opens to allow for God's light to shine inside us, and the more we're able to perceive as far as our intuition goes. I'm gonna have to stop myself and wrap this conversation up because I know I, for one, can really just talk about this for hours and hours and hours. And I know that there is time ahead of us to go into other conversations along the same lines. But for now, I just want to finish saying that you have every right to feel yourself and express yourself in all of your glory. So if religion has ever held you back, or even people that are close to you in your own life has ever made you feel like you were the one that was different, I hope that you understand that your intuition is nothing but God's way of letting you know that He is with you every step you take. And everything He wants to give you and everything He offers to you each and every day is only yours for the taking. So take it, run with it, grow closer to Him. Do what you can to feel His presence around you at all times. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time, get lost in joy and remember, you are always connected.